Thank you for being here, and help me welcome a trio of poets.
I'll take the high chair.
Why is your bio so long, Austin?
I don't know. I don't know who wrote that. Way too long. Well, we thought we would trade off reading poems, just sort of bop around and see how one poem leads to another. That was the plan. So bear with us, because it seems like none of us have ever done this. We're going to try it. So I'm going to lead off. I thought I would just read the proem, the pre-first poem in Groom, which is this new collection that came out this year with Unbound Edition, and it's a heavy collection. Not that my first book isn't also heavy, but I started it in Provincetown, which is off the tip of Massachusetts, Cape Cod. Got to spend 7 months up there. And it is a revisiting of my past and a re-reckoning of my upbringing. So this very first proem is called Prayer to Hermes. So I'm looking at these guys like, okay, start thinking my gods, invocation, okay, classics, prayers. Prayer to Hermes. You plucked the 100 eyes of Argus and stuck them in the peacock's tail, turning every way to keep the way. You outshift Eden's flaming sword. Short of a halo, lend me your traveler's hat, your cloak for shelter in the heath, your shoes for wandering among the shades. Let me not deceive me. No contrivance or dream escapes you. O God of wrestling, teach me to wriggle and bend, the holds and the throws. The past is slippery. You are the thief at the gates.
You got something? Oh, no. Don't clap at every poem, y'all. Don't do it. I love it. Don't do it. I can jump in.
Yeah, go.
This is fun because this is not the poem that I was planning on reading first, but now we're gonna popcorn it, and I like it, and I'm gonna go with the mysticism. This poem is called 3 Bobcat Day. 1 bobcat in the tea dregs light of dawn outside Mountain Home, Arkansas, and then, absurd, impossible, tucking its tailless bottom to scoot under bush, another. God, you said, show me a third. Show me one more, and I'll believe. Here in the spring Siskiyous, 4 does dew-step the meadow each morning, timid yet timely, present through the bloom and dissolution of cherry trees flowering, through the heart's slow settling of sediment, as the river prepares a bed for the steelhead's return, and a beacon for the strange brain that sings to them of home when they reach it. Is noticing coincidence a form of divinity or worship? If not, a comforting mistake. Oh yes, I reply when you write, healed grows up around and inside you, unruly as blackberry bramble, coming back thorned as ever. Oh yes, though still one dawn, all the regular chorus and clatter, but only 3 deer in their split black ballet shoes, and the mind, limber with lions, licks a moony claw, bounds back along the ever so delicately darkened tracks through dew.
I write a lot about God, not necessarily some angry old man in the sky type God, but if I was going to say my church would be nature. I got 2 here. One is new. which, if I have another collection, I hope comes from that. And I wrote it in Malawi, Africa, which is odd in a way, but there was a reason for that. It's very short. Goes out to a friend of ours, Casey Hackathorn from Missoula. It's called Kingdom Come. I don't believe in heaven, unless by heaven you mean a certain spot on the Blackfoot River, a few crow miles upstream of Missoula, Montana, where, on a summer's evening, the light falls just so on the green, sun-gilded, drop-dimpled water. This is all together now. Leave the darkness to the crickets. They know what they're doing, sawing away on bended knee, carpenters of the night. They build their songs, little ditties of holy, out of thin air, some cartilage, and the truth. See how the evening gown of heaven, sequined with stars, vaulted itself across the ballroom of sky, how the moon cups its ear, rises to hear them. The whole meadow turns out. Fireflies winking like lighters, coyotes practicing their scales, an apicella of frogs joining in from the pond. And so the question becomes, at what point do you not stand up and applaud? At what point do you not fall to your knees and weep, saying thank you to that eternally shy, famously invisible composer, standing before us all, waving her silent baton.
Yeah, I was thinking about, I guess we're really onto the gods thing. I luckily have a few gods in here. It's quite the pagan book. Vulcan figures into the book. If any of you have ever been to Birmingham, Alabama, where I was raised, there is a famously large statue of Vulcan that looks over the city, and was definitely a landmark of my upbringing there, and particularly of this book, as it's a kind of coming of age reckoning. So there's a number of Vulcan, but in particular that last image of holding the baton, Vulcan is holding this torch, and this poem will tell you more about that. So this is Vulcan. Oh, and my dear friend Danny Ceballos did these illustrations at the section breaks with a bamboo pen and ink. And so here's Vulcan. Vulcan. From Olympus, Vulcan fell a day and a night, waiting to hit. After the World's Fair, our statue of the blacksmith lay by the tracks, going to seed. When they hoisted him up over the hills and lit his torch, red if someone died in traffic that day, and green if not, his kingdom of steel mills, his mines in the hills, were already well in decline. His limbs were filled with concrete, and at some juncture the world's largest cast iron statue had begun to crumble, as had I, hours into my first acid trip, fish-eyed behind the plate glass overlook, in memory at least, inside Vulcan's head. The lights of Birmingham breached the blood-brain barrier, crushed between sleep and her twin. In winter, the ridge cast its shadow downtown, and Vulcan's torch pointed at the foundry. Who cast the ingot of Steve's truck? Who couldn't help himself from changing the setting, mixing mischief on a whim? Who was teaching me, as usual, it all depended, how much he was needed, the only one who could and didn't. How everything can be turned with a nudge. What is vanity but the shadow cast in the foundry of the valley of the shadow of death? Finally, it wasn't truth or vengeance, but boredom. The need not to discover, but confuse, manipulate, and confuse. At the mercy of variables, real and imaginary, induced, insinuated, just to see. He played with us. He played against us. He played us against each other. The troll inside the stoplight, playing havoc with the traffic, up in the air like Ariel, a book of airs.
This might be a little bit of a leap, but this was like the right poem to read after that. And this is my poem with a reference to Livingston. And I always think when you come to a community and if you have a poem about that community, you should read it. I read my Butte poems last night in Butte. And just a little context on this poem, you know, there's one of the themes that run through this book is just kind of reckoning with the different tools that we use to protect and to preserve ourselves, and when those tools become ways that we also create damage against each other, against the world, and certainly a big part of this book is me kind of thinking about and reckoning with a really powerful gun culture that I grew up in. And this poem began in 2018 when students all over the country were walking out of schools in protest with the lack of response to the Parkland shooting. So that's referenced in this poem, as is the death of Stephen Hawking. It's called A Brief History of a Hole in the Wall. Stephen Hawking's dead, I learned in the morning's lean blue light from the web, which the physicist himself said connects us all now, like neurons in a giant brain. Children are walking from classrooms today in protest. I'm thinking of the time my father accidentally triggered a rifle while cleaning it. The bullet he didn't believe was there passed through the kitchen wall, out into the living room, and buried itself in the exterior brick. Visiting, I lifted a painting of white iris to find the hole hidden beneath, a pale gray bloom with a charred heart. A photo circulates on the internet of the students of Livingston, Montana, holding hands in an oval beneath the looming, shorn teeth of the snowy Absaroka Range. You can see the wind in their clothes and hair. My father learned to play chess when his friend Larry, at 13, set off his shotgun into his own throat and face while climbing a fence. Always the fence, its hook and noose, its stumble. Dad bought a cheap chess set and would visit Larry, who lived, teaching them both the way of the creeping pawn, the heavy king, the sleek sideways knight. Hawking said the brain itself was like a computer. When the parts stop working, that's it. There is no heaven for broken down computers. He also said the past, like the future, exists only as a spectrum of possibilities. My father's voice at my ear, passing on what he knew. Sight, steady, squeeze between breaths.
So this is harder than it looks. We haven't met each other since the first time I met, so I would imagine if we were really good friends, we bounce off each other much more readily. But that made me think that, I have a line in a poem referencing children and guns. So that's going to be the jumping off point. This is a list poem. I had finished Benediction of Wind with one, and I wanted to write another list poem for this volume. And the full title, I won't go into that, but the full title should be A short list of things to wish for when you wish upon a star. Milkweed for monarchs. Pollen-laden bees. Gretel, I thought of you when I wrote this next line. Honest to God. And the first line was for Bob Pyle. This line was for you. So a short list of things to wish for when you wish upon a star. Milkweed for monarchs. Pollen-laden bees. Glaciers to remain glaciers. Let the trees understand. Wish for new snow in the mountains. Full rivers and streams. Wish cool temperatures for the trout. Wish for the trout. Wish that our wishes amount to something, that our prayers be heard. Wish for the elephants, the oceans, death of the American lawn. Wish that the Constitution wasn't written in vain. Wish for the bundle of rags on the park bench, that they wake to a warm place to stay. Wish for them courage in the face of all things. Wish for them their dignity and a new pair of socks. Wish for the stars themselves. We need them more than they know. Wish for the shooting ones, and wish that they be many. Wish for the smallest among us, the little ones, the frail. Wish for the strength to stand up and defend them. Wish that kindness becomes the new drug, goodwill contagious, that you're as good as your dog thinks you are, for more time with your mother, your father. Wish that love wasn't so hard. Wish for what pain teaches us, hard as that may be. Wish for chance meetings with strangers, that they become friends. Wish for forgiveness for the harm that you've done. Wish forgiveness of others, the harm they did you. Wish for silence and the ability to slow down, for long walks in the country with the sun going down. Wish for more laughter, more laughter, more laughter, for an abundance of joy. Wish for the innocence of children, the wisdom of elders. Wish that wherever you go, you are always at home. Wish for the child hiding under their desk. Wish that the gun jams. Wish that this country comes to its senses. Wish God does the same. Wish for health, happiness, and a swift, painless death. Wish it for every creature and living thing on this earth. Then wish for the day you don't have to make these wishes, or anything even remotely like them ever again.
Well, that really covers it. I mean, I could pick anything now. I was grabbing onto to several things, but the word joy seemed important there, and it's kind of a fun game because this, I don't know, might not seem like a poem about joy, but the word joy is in it. So let's go there. This is called Celestial Realm. And I think it gives some context to the story of the book and the figure sort of behind the scenes who is the groomer of the collection. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Celestial Realm. What did Steve look like? I drew him once in purple-colored pencil. Such handsomeness didn't hurt his chances, charming mom. Devious green eyes, high cheek and forehead, square, smooth jaw, long lashes, even a bit of the English beak that runs on mom's sides of the family. He passed as straight, or with a few touches, a woman he'd sold coke and drag, or as a relation of mine. We were in a coffee shop, mid-90s, pre-Starbucks, Southside Birmingham, crowned in clove smoke in a corner. It was dark roast, big clay mugs, wide wedges of cake. He's looking down at an oblique angle, gapped teeth and lashes, almost bashful. He was anything but. My pencil struggled with the shadows of his cut-off sleeves, a dancer's shoulders. But I captured something. Joy. First blush, that ever only successful portrait from life in my life. Only Steve could have brought it out. Probably he was drawing too, or laying out cards. Goth girls and baggy grungers milled around thrift store couches and recliners, like the furniture in his own den. Low, reddish lamplight. Outside, Highland Avenue wound the cusp of Red Mountain. It makes twin incursions into folds of the limestone, describing two declivities, crotch-shaped parks, dark now, known for cruising.
I think I'm going to respond to kind of the capturing of something, or the idea of a moment in time. One moment, it is summer. Glasses of white wine in our hands as we hover around Beverly's evening primrose bush, awaiting the promised 9:10 p.m. show. Soon enough, I'll be barefoot in the cold grass, picking apples and listening for elk hollering like ghosts in their fierce and protective courting. The season, a lightless tunnel, the path in darkness. But this moment, there they are. Petals shivering loose from furled cones, flicking out their buttery wings into fragrant, four-fingered palms. Oh, I think, as we all say, oh, there it is. The way to flare from shelter, willing burst and die. We stand quiet as the sphinx moths arrive.
Okay, I might change it up a little bit. And this isn't a used, you don't sell used books here, do you, Mark?
Mm-hmm. They're mostly used.
Oh, yeah. Okay, my mistake. Sorry. So this then is very appropriate. The word velature, which I hadn't come upon, but is the strange wistfulness of used bookstores.
What's the word?
Velature. And apparently there's 3 or 4 different words for used bookstores. This is a prose poem. So this is just an invented character. She'd spend hours wandering the aisles, mouthing the titles of forgotten stories, leafing through the bitter sweetness of old cookbooks. She loved the soul-sad stacks, their wistfulness, the forlorn atmosphere of unturned pages. There was the lazy stroll, the tip-tad, the joy of hooking an index finger over the threadbare spine. Lick of thumb, turn of page, glasses balanced on the end of her nose. Aren't we all just a little dog-eared or two? Behind the cash register, first editions under lock and key. Upstairs, science fiction and the wood floors creak. In the children's corner, Dr. Seuss and the deep suffering of the world forgotten. Autumn days she liked best. Rain outside, rain in her heart, pebbles of rain sliding down the window pane like tears in her cheek. With a copy of Rumi and another of Blake, she settled into the poetry corner where, turning to the tranquility of the napping cat, a delicious weariness overtook her blood and bones.
I was thinking about books, which, even when it's not a poem about a bookstore, images of books often make it into my poems, and I think many poets' poems. But when you mentioned rain as well, I'm going to go with City Brook. Coming down the slope and into the enclave, a tiny kingdom. Before merging with the seam running the length of the golf course, I heard it flowed through a house, a girl's I never knew, someone's cousin. A creek I never saw, and a girl I never knew, and a house I only got a glimpse of below the street, hidden in the trees, leaving me looking down from some banister at it running through the din. For a moment, before it got exposed and lost in another body, rainless, birdless, its white noise in every room, its metallic damp and grit you can't get in the books, in all the books.
I've got a book poem. Do this. Charles, I think you published this one in High Desert Journal. This is a poem that kind of riffs off of a book I was reading in the woods. It's called Dictionary of the American West, and it was this really interesting kind of like gathering of Old West terms, like used to describe, for example, bone pilgrims, right, who were the men who would pick up the bison bones that were left on the prairie to ship back east to fertilize with plants. So you hear some of those Western terms in this poem. Bone pilgrims. How terribly beautiful a name for the men who skulk the prairie, seeking the last of the bison bones scattered by ghosts and coyotes to send to eastern fertilizer plants, the tall, fin-like dorsal process bones that held up the great muscled mound of head, the heads themselves ground to grow hydrangeas. I'm on page 34 of Wynd Levins's Dictionary of the American West, which begins with bois de vache, or buffalo chips, wood of the cow, used to kindle fire in the wide, arid West before it was dry too of the buffalo. It includes bolo tie, one of the small sartorial indulgences of the Western male, and bologna bowl next to bonanza, a nice symmetry there, and ends with the books won't freeze, a phrase used to comfort cattlemen, reminder that the herd was bought on the numbers in the ledger and not the beeves frozen to tented hide on the prairie's bare plate. I shut the book. Outside, the evening is saying things I miss. The aspens flick their gold fingerprints to the soil, done shivering with speech till spring, though below ground they whisper and rise. Below ground, they are one animal. A few pages back, under A, Blevins recounts the Utes aspen tale that I knew first from the man who hauled the poles of his teepee behind his truck like long bones. It's the story about the time the creators paid a special trip to Earth on full moon, and all the living things trembled to show their awe, trembled in homage, except the proud aspen, who now, we know, in recompense, quakes whenever looked upon. This man tried also to teach me a few plain signs, like small bounding animal looks out at you from safety, like we eat well tonight, like moose, or how the symbol for snake looks a lot like the one for weaver, especially from the distance at which one shouts with one's hands at one's enemy or friend, which is what one is trying to determine, while keeping, if possible, from trembling in the tall grass and making large, self-identifying gestures.
So there was a line in there about the evening says things to us. So that this isn't saying things, but it's, well, and I'm going to switch. I'm going to go to Aspen Grove, because you mentioned Aspen a couple times. Can you remind me what poem is coming out in that anthology?
Of yours?
Yeah.
Isn't it your Snow Geese poem?
Okay.
I think so.
I thought it might have been Aspen Grove.
I think Snow Geese.
And this is another prose poem. She chose to love all the world. The yellow aspen leaves rattling the air, sunlight leoparding the ground. There were the altruistic flowers, and the wind a long time coming. All afternoon she'd sit with a purling stream, a tickle in her ear, the blue sky so far, far away. In ones and twos, she'd watch the aspen leaves release, twist, and sashayed to the ground. Watched the shadows stepping like cats from beneath the stones. At her feet, coyotes scat. And by the water, the hoofprints of deer like tiny heartbeats pressed into the snow. Yes, night would come, winter would come, but she stayed, dreaming the world into the one she wanted. Call her any name you want. Sister, daughter, mother, grandmother, savior, friend, champion, hero.
I had one and I lost it. But there's a number of creeks in this book, and again, and clearly in yours as well. So the water points me to another one of my creek poems. And this one is just called Creek. A to B, the plunge of least resistance. Quantum, route, questing route, hidden, bidden. No creek is straight, can assume any shape. Glorified gutter, convicts convert, where you were first taken. Initiate, convert. An opening, a deepening, a naked body. Plagiarized, possessed, a word appears, you can rhyme but not define. Low point, bedrock, favorite channel, a cast of castaways, oh cast-off skin of water, a getting into, a getting away, or away with, family defection arranged in a kind of theater, a kind of play, each novel stretch, ritual, and revelation. It follows its own lesson.
I wrote a lot of these poems when I was very lucky to have a residency where I spent 7.5 months living off the grid, 2 hours from any kind of community, no cell service, no Wi-Fi, in 2020. And when I was at this residency, I tried my hardest to develop a meditation practice, which you would think maybe with 7.5 months of solitude you might get good at. We'll find out how that went. And one of the practices or one of the meditations that I worked really hard on is the metta meditation, which is a classic Buddhist meditation. You might know it, and it's just a repeated mantra, and it's you say, may all beings be well, may all beings know peace. You kind of wish these things for all the beings in the world, but monkey mind makes such things hard. Meditation, quiet, I say to the mind, and the mind says, frog song, bear emergence, death of all salmon kind, local proliferation of buried nuclear silos, tomorrow's breakfast, blossom riot of bees in pollen tresses, a child reaching into a sleek, unlocked gun safe. May all beings be safe, I go on, and the mind hears only scribble-scutter of mice in the insulation. May all beings be well, I insist, and the mind pries open the eye to see one, like a fat, suede knuckle, paw tucked, slinking behind the stove, along the corner and out of sight. May all beings know contentment in hard times. The mind reminds me that mice are thigmotactic and hug a wall like a mother's hip. Ah, little cannonball of knowing. May all beings know peace, I say, but the mind already is planning where to put the poison.
I'm kind of stuck on that.
Read whatever you want, Charles.
So yeah, well, there's a lot of river references in my work. This book also has, I'm just going to, sorry about this. I got to read this one because my grandson is in the audience. And he really, really didn't want me to read this one. So, because I love torturing him so much. So, this is for Ezekiel Wellington Charles Brandt. Now, I did nickname him Ezekiel. I forgot my water bottle, Brandt, because he has a habit of forgetting his water bottle repeatedly. But I've just been having a fantastic time. Can I say this, Joyce? I really don't like kids. I just don't. I never have. Never figured it out why people like those little things. But I'm making an exception for Ezekiel, and he moved here recently from the Seattle area, so it's great to be able to give him some sort of Montana outdoor experiences. And we've been up at Beaver Creek and teaching him Boy Scout. Right? But it turns out he's teaching me. And just like that, the whole grand bazaar of childhood spread out before me. An entire world of trees waiting to be climbed. We were jumping in puddles, drinking from hoses, riding bikes. Look, no hands. As hand in hand we went. Oh, the Celestine joy of lying on my back watching clouds, having hour-long conversations with frogs and bees. No, I wasn't growing old. I was growing young again, with my grandson, skipping stones.
I was thinking about those trees, and this was the other book one I had in mind, but also since I'm clearly sitting between two animal poets, I have an animal in here. I like animals. When I was a kid, my three favorite things all had to start with an A. Art, animals, and what was the third one? I can never remember. Maybe automobiles, that was into cars. Stretch to, with the A there, but. Also want to just thank Elk River, say congrats to both of y'all on your books, and happy birthday to Carly yesterday. This is called Young Buck. After Carl Phillips. I looked up, and the buck looked up. I'd come to read where the oaks stretch almost to the ground. He'd come off the thick wooded bluff or side ravine with its creek, the creek that made it, buried by the city. Maybe 6 points all told, like a teen's first stubble at the threshold of delicacy and strength Steve found preferable, and why wouldn't he? How does Byron put it? Slender but well knit. Newly defined shoulders, the beginnings of a build, relegated for now to the secondary. Ankles turned on a lathe. He was slim enough yet to slip between a post and a gate, or looked at head on to nearly disappear. The age in deer years, a coach said I ran like a deer. 9th grade baseball tryouts. It was all I could do. Tongue running around his spindly muzzle, tail down, quivering. He bent to graze, but before he got there, rose to check I was still where I was, then dropped his head again, but not his guard, not raising up again prematurely, not all the way. And so on and so forth, stuck in his loop. A needle wavering for how long? Each pass closer by halves, if I hadn't moved.
How are we doing here? Did you start our last round? We're going to do like...
Yeah, was that why I said that?
Is that why you said that? I don't know. Is that our second to last round?
What is the...
How are people feeling? What are we doing, Mark?
It feels like 2 more hours. Does that?
Okay, that was the start of it. Okay, all right, fine.
Winding down.
Yeah, okay, all right. Well, then I'm gonna
Because
see.
then we need some time for Q&A.
Great.
Okay. I'll see your deer poem and raise your bison poem. This is a new poem, so it's not in the book. It turns out that poetry is not the best way to pay the bills, so I do have a day job, but it's a great day job. I work for American Prairie, which is, if you're not familiar, is a really incredible, ambitious grassland restoration project happening in kind of north central Montana, and in what is perhaps one of the most unique job perks on the planet. I have had a couple of opportunities to go out and harvest a bison on the prairie, which is truly one of the most extraordinary and humbling things that I've done in my life. And this February, I had another opportunity, and I went out and I did harvest a bison. But before that, about 2 weeks before my harvest date, I went to Billings, and I had surgery to remove some cysts from my ovaries. And I don't know that I would recommend crawling around the prairie with 5 holes in your abdomen when it's 9 degrees, stalking buffalo. But maybe I would recommend it. It was amazing. This is what that was about. I bury the buffalo's head in the yard, because April has given reprieve, as always, to the way winter keeps her tendrils tightly wound, and the ground, for a few days, relaxes, poked by robins. Lilac leaves, just out and succulent, say nothing of flowers. 2 months prior, as more snow drifted over the prairie, as short-eared owls combed the air, already imagining dusk in the clouded cold, I opened this buffalo's body, struck by her small brown teats, which had never nursed a calf, and warmed my hands in the heat of her, gasping as the blood moved over my knuckles, gripped the slick knife tighter. Brief weeks before that, a surgeon 200 miles south opened me, starting as I did with the low belly. Microbes will do the work of derobing the soft fur from her face. Though the lashed lids have dipped down towards the settling socket, I know there is still jelly from her eyes for the beetles to sip. I bury her without thinking about it, facing east, looking at the house. I bury her past the tips of her slate-colored horns, smoother than my shovel handle. The surgeon asked me if I wanted photos from the operation, and I said, sure. When they arrived in the mail, poured glossy from the envelope, I was startled by how unrecognizable I was inside. I thought first of her.
Well, I'm going to dip back into my first book, which are actually micro-essays, nonfiction essays. I would often read from it, and people would come up and say, oh, I loved your poems. But this is bison. It's an easy choice here. It's only 500 words or so. Coming over a small rise, daydreaming. So I'm from Vermont. I had never seen a buffalo, a bison in my life. And this is one of the very, very early days in Montana. Coming up over a small rise, daydreaming, I was stunned. I stopped the truck and leaned with both forearms on the steering wheel. A long breath, jagged as a saw, escaping in a misty vulgarity against the windshield. Bent to grazing, close to 100 bison were scattered across the hill below me. They looked implausible, their massive heads and immense shoulders tapering down to ridiculously small hips as delicate and fragile, or so they seemed, as to be the hip bones of Christ. I opened the door and stood in the chill air. A single bull, the closest, lifted the dark mass of its head and swung its face to me. In that initial moment, it was like watching a tree stump being torn from the ground, a boulder brought to life. Growing up in the East, bison to me were mythical creatures, conscripts of history. They existed in textbooks. Now a herd was drifting towards me, sunlight shining through the low cloud of dust kicked up around their knees and glinting off the wet black of their noses. The bison approached in a slow plod. It was like the aimless roamings of kings. Their coats were deep chocolate brown, shedding in places, their bare hide exposed to charcoal gray. Despite their colossal size, they moved with a simple grace, and it was easy to see exactly how much they belonged to the land. In the quiet morning, the only sound was the contrapuntal snort of their breathing. It came in short bursts, as if each animal was the train pulling out from a station. The bison climbed at a molasses pace, each step tapping out a geologic backbeat for the stones. As each animal came broadside to me, it would pause and swing the woolly anvil of its head to face me, then fix me with a brown, uncorrupted stare. From 20 feet away, they peered out from behind huge shanks of hair, and I saw a blue-collar expression embedded in their blunt faces, a resignation and a working man's blues. Like old prize fighters, I could believe they had seen everything. It took half an hour for the herd to pass, parting around me as if I was a rock in a stream. After they were gone, I remained looking at the empty field. I felt washed clean. Brute strength and power are serious narcotics. So too the ultimately delicate and fine. As a species, we are drawn to these extremes, the unique and rare lassoing us with unsuspecting beauty. In the wake of the bison, I sensed a space opening inside of me. I had been let in on a momentous moment. To this day, I have no idea what that secret might be, but that does not bother me in the least.
So I think this is my last one, all right?
I think that's what we're doing, yeah.
So I want to end on one of the last poems, and it's the last poem that I wrote for the book. And Corrie and I were talking about how nice it is to have a good editor, which doesn't always happen, even if you're lucky enough to have a book. But with this book, I had a really great editor, the wonderful poet Peter Campion. And among other just great insights, he inspired me to write a new poem. Even after he took what I thought was a finished manuscript. He thought there was one more to write from the present. And at the time, I was doubtful, first of all, but I said, okay, I tried to humor him. And I happened to be doing committee work as a professor for a committee dealing with sexual harassment and those type issues on campus. And that weekend, I had volunteered as a member of the committee to help out with something called Take Back the Night, which I had never heard of, but is originally founded as an event, a march, a testimony of survivors of women, started on college campuses in the 70s, and now includes all kinds of people. And this is Take Back the Night. A disproportionate amount, did you know, of night goes into making a teenager. They wear it like a baggy shirt, shapeless and unfinished. And there's a few quotations in here, italicized, actually from Venus and Adonis, which has surprised me that in many ways seems like a poem about abuse. The audio's in and out. That's Shakespeare, by the way, Venus and Adonis. The audio's in and out. A Stygian mizzle sidles in under the lights. Soggy purple crepe streamers. Projected on a screen, which a coach, see his feet, props against the wind. The founder won't be content until sexual violence is eradicated from the globe. My job, securing thin black plastic table covers with painter's tape. The wind pulls free. My job, leading off with a poem. Afterwards, more excruciating silence. A few others answer the altar call. Wet leaves out of nowhere, turning back to soil. Soggy slogans, acronyms, oaths, swag have this advantage. They can't lose a magic feeling they never had. Tricked out chrome trim makes a plain sedan more plain come morning. At home, in bed, I rub your head, say it was a shit show. You'd have to eradicate humanity. Like the shallow end, pool bottom, coming up to kiss a boy's new rule-breaking front teeth. What my therapist was saying, which I dove off camera to write down, wasn't deep. There was something very powerful about being chaste. No, it says chosen as the object of attention. This is Shakespeare again. This is Plato. In the most important part of ourselves, about the most important things, we have been deceived. The year wears the nights like adolescence, in the act of a kiss, in the soft groin sheathed. I know like I know in the morning that I love you, like I love your smell, that even tonight, even though I feel like a fraud, someone has heard.
Thank you, Austin and Charles, for your wonderful poems, and thank you all for spending a beautiful Thursday night with us, and thank you, Elk River, for having us. I'm going to read this last poem. This book has been out about 6 months, and I always end with this poem because it is a poem I wrote as I was leaving my time in the wilderness and coming back to the world, and because it's a blessing. Mercy me, said the women folk where I was raised, and in my mind, mercy was a verb, the action reflexive. Though of course the wolf in the kingdom of winter does not mercy the elk. The owl does not mercy the hare that has trembled loose from its delicate coat of stillness. The word's been used since the 12th century to mean God's forgiveness of his creatures' offenses. Such mercy is not what my father had in mind when he asked me to take a pistol to live in the wilderness. I didn't. That was not how I imagined my days, strapping its cold weight to my hip, a saunter to the river. Good morning, larkspur. Good morning, death camas and moonflower. I am more deadly than you. Would I slip it into the crook of the quince tree while I crouched to weed kale? Would I, after all, shoot a bear eclipsing my doorway? Would I shoot a man? Back home, another gun in the safe where my bedroom dresser used to stand. Out there, the news, a loaded gun, returns again and again to the loaded gun. Here, the old growth murmurs at night. The dark spones groan and creep. Once, barefoot in starlight, the color of ginger root, trembling on the porch at the unknowable's cacophony, the dog in a huff, I wondered if the fear, in the end, would get me first. On the long, hawk-spangled drive east, all things appeared to me as bodies. The log haulers piled with the fallen forms of fur coming down from the mountains. Chicken trucks with their live cargoes crushed into hunchback and the smashed daisies of feathers from which a dim red eye looks out. Across the frostbit flatlands of Idaho, gleaming silver trucks piled with fleshy potatoes, bodies, bodies. And on the radio, a story about a body unearthed from high in the Andes, a woman's form arrayed with spear and axe head a big game hunter. I want to summon a blessing on this vanishing year, but I forget how this works, what to say, in what order. I'm thinking of my good aunt, who for all those years, and even after the chemo and the electroshock therapy, tucked her pale, delicate chin at table and said, with quavering, but without irony, "We give thanks." The moon's between the fir's ribs, up there in the god-dark black. The fox still moves in the roots and the rest. You could say and not lie that this is most of what I long for in the way of distance and the way of desire. May the fetters fall from all of us this year. May the wild light get way down in our bones. May we, without requital, mercy one another, with hands like wings, with unarmed hands.
Likewise, thanks both of you. It's been really enjoyable. Mark, of course, and Andrea for this fantastic place. I like to often read other poets' work when I give readings, because you're here because you love poetry in general, and of course you wanted to come and hear maybe some new work by us, but I try and highlight some other Montana artists, Pacific Northwest artists, and also some of the classics. And this is a poem that I've been ending my most recent readings with, and just because it seems like such a great poem to end with. So this is, and I'm sure most of you are going to know it, it's Pablo Neruda, Keeping Quiet. Now we will count to 12, and we will all keep still. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for 1 second and not move our arms so much. It would be an exotic moment, without rush, without engines. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and the man gathering salt would look at his hurt hands. Those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victory with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade, doing nothing. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it's about. I want no truck with death. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. Perhaps the earth can teach us, as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. Now, I'll count to 12, and you keep quiet, and I will go.
Any questions out there for our poets?
So, how did this come about? Because you said that you don't know does anybody know, how did it all come about? Great idea, I love this.
This is your fault. Yeah.
Which makes it Carly's fault.
Yeah,
I know
Carly
Carly.
came into the bookstore and said, you have to book this Austin guy.
Thank you.
And I was afraid to say no.
And I made my way out here because my brother lives in Helena and has for many years, and I've been visiting, and through him met his friend, the poet Corrie. We read together with our last books in Helena, so pulled her in.
And I kind of crashed the party because I contacted Mark and said, hey, I got a new book, I'd love to come read. And he said, oh, you got a pair of poets I think you match well with, so that's how I showed up.
And how many readings you were in Butte last night?
Yes.
All of you?
Just me in Austin.
Okay.
Yeah, this book came out in January, so I've been running around. This is kind of the end of stuff for me for a while. But yeah, Charles is just getting started, I think.
Yeah, but it just came out last week. So pretty new.
Where are you headed next?
Now, the next week is Bozeman and Butte, and then Billings with Gretel in a couple weeks, and Helena, Great Falls. The circuit, the usual.
Yeah.
I'm going down to Jackson Hole Riders this weekend, doing a workshop there before driving back east.
Okay, this is a weird question that I just can't figure off the spot. What is the longest it's taken you to write one poem?
My whole life?
The longest?
The longest
It's
it's
just a silly question.
that it's
That was a
taken.
great
The
question.
longest it's taken to write one poem.
So
is
the
that-
longest it's taken me to write one poem.
It's tempting.
I have a poem that maybe is done. That I was looking back and I started in at least in 2019, and maybe I finished it this year.
I have stuff going back to the 90s that I'm still sitting in the back, and every once in a while I pull it out and try and improve it by one line or one word. So, yeah.
Yeah, same. I mean, I think there are poems that are just sort of. I had a professor in college who said that sometimes poems need to grow in the dark. Like put it in a drawer for a while, forget about it, come back to it. Maybe it's a whole poem. Maybe you just Frankenstein a piece of it and put it onto something else. So yeah, years and years.
Because we always think of them as being quicker than like a novel, but they're, it sounds like you can work on them just as long.
You can, or sometimes you're really lucky and like a little window opens in the air and a poem falls out, and you're like, that was it. I'm pretty happy with that. And then sometimes you tinker forever, or poems kind of never are finished.
Yep. They talk about Elizabeth Bishop, or she talked about how she would have poems that she just knew that there were parts missing, and she'd tack it up on the wall, and it could be there 20 years, and she just wasn't going to be done until she got that whatever penultimate section. And I've always admired not only the length that she would apparently go through, but knowing what was missing.
What is all of your relationship with being maybe a political poet? None of you are sort of political poets, but it felt like all of your work had threads of advocacy or perspective or politics, and so I'm just curious about that identity.
That's a great question. Gosh, and it's also like, what is having an opinion political? Maybe it is. It seems to be. I mean, I do think this book feels to me like I was sort of ready to start to think through poems about some things that are really hard for me, like particularly, being a person who owns guns and hunts, and also a person who just grew up in this kind of outrageous, intense gun culture, and how, my father, who I love so much, is like very extreme about guns, and like it's tough to feel strongly about something and also want to see a place at the table for people who feel really differently from you. And so I think this book is me thinking through that for myself, and I'm not necessarily trying to tell anybody anything that they should feel. So I don't know, I struggle with that sometimes. It's like, am I a political poet for saying how I feel? I think probably yes.
So I had a friend, we're in discussion, and she's quite a political poet, or can be. And I said, my stuff's nothing like yours, it's not political at all. And she said, bullshit, your stuff is very political. A deer walking through a meadow can be political. And so it changed, a little light bulb went off there. Now I have a poem that was pulled from this book, and it's called My Vote. And I wish Doug had been here, because the very first, my vote for President of the United States, grizzly bear. For Vice President, Canyon Wren. And it goes all through, all the cabinet members. I won't read the whole thing. So that's obviously a very, very political poem. The thing that's difficult now is the cover of the book is by a very good friend, Bobby McKibben, a pastel artist in the Bitterroot, and we're having a conversation just last week. about, I mean, we live in some pretty shitty times right now. And here we are, she's creating this very pastel, beautiful art. I'm writing my little poems about deers and meadow and this and that. And we were thinking, we gotta stand up and maybe have more of a say. But that's not in our nature as the artists that we are. Right? That would be untrue to ourselves if we started writing these blatantly political poems or drawing blatantly political art. So it's a tough one, because I do feel that we have a responsibility as artists to say some things, but then we still have to be true to ourselves. So some of it leaks out here and there in a nature poem, because that can be political.
Yeah, I agree. It is it's like the question, and our whole country has been, having these kind of going through these political, political ague for the last however long. So you can feel it. Its repercussions up through all the arts, and sometimes it can be really amazing to sit back and see it vibrate through one's own work. I mean, especially in the world of academic poetry in the past and new criticism and stuff. I mean, it was being political, overtly political stances were, many writers, that was sort of trained out of you. And so, I mean, that alone needs to be remembered and pointed out, even though that's kind of hard to imagine with the kind of poems in the New Yorker or whatever now. But that's only really very recently. And for myself, confronting my past abuse and working through that, and being on this committee I talked about, and volunteering for Take Back the Night, it's kind of like having a book like this and sharing it. Sometimes I just feel absolutely horrible about it. I'm like, why am I putting people through this? But there's nothing I can really do about it. I'm just doing the work that the art is telling me to do, and it is political, and that's a big part of why I'm here.
So, I just taught a workshop the other day in kind of the music of poetry, kind of following the music and trusting the music of that the poem has a certain inherent music, and if you just trust it and follow it, the poem will say what needs to be said. Was the thinking of this this workshop I was teaching, and I'm wondering for each of you how much you're listening to the music of this language, and letting that guide you, or are you just writing intellectually of what you're thinking about?
Yeah, well, the whole cadence is vital to me. I really do pay attention to the way each line is going to work with the next. I mean, I'm speaking it out loud over and over again. I sometimes worry that because I inflect so much when I'm giving a reading, that maybe on the black and white of the page it doesn't come off like that. But no, the music is incredibly important. It's one of the most guiding parts of how I write.
Yeah, no, I spent a lot of time thinking about that. I'm really interested in, also in movement, I guess, maybe is how I think about what matters a lot to me in poems more than music. Not that the music isn't important, but like I just feel my eye and ear and sense of the poem usually develops through its movement. And I think a lot about like line breaks and how those emphasize and shift and throw you off sometimes and pull you through a poem. So I I come back, I think, to sounds more than I draft with sounds. Like, I think I draft with momentum and shape and movement, and then kind of come back and play with sound and music later in the process.
There's a, music and poetry. It is a blurry term, right? What do we mean by that? There's a really, I was bringing this up recently. There's a really funny and telling essay back from maybe the late 90s or early 2000s, and it's a little squabble between the poets, the editor I mentioned, Peter Campion, and Mark Halliday. And Campion had said something about, complaining about some poetry not having music or musical enough, and then Halliday writes this big essay where he says, what does that mean? That's ridiculous. Reader, I give you a test. Here's 10 examples. Which has the most music? See, it's like it's not a real thing, but of course it is. And for me, it's it's, you can tell by the way we're talking about it that it's closely aligned with form. And yes, it's an issue of sound. I know that at this point as a writer, if I am too conscious about the sound or the form, that's not good for me. I need that to be, and part of it is I think that it just really comes naturally to me. And so I'm actually better off thinking about other things and letting that stuff come as it comes. That even includes rhymes that happen, unless I'm like doing couplets, which occasionally I'll do. And so, but that's just for me how I have figured out my process works best. But I think a way of saying that is because I do count on the music. I know I can count on the music, so I'm kind of thinking about other things.
Anyone else? Questions?
We'll hang around. You can come talk to us. We're friendly.
Yeah, they'll be
Sign you
here.
a book.
We have all of their books at the front counter, and they will be happy to sign them for you. And thank you again for the wonderful.